It was a cold night at the International Deep Space Monitoring Station in Alaska. The snow outside made everything silent, except the soft hum of the machines inside the control room. Dr. Lena Morrow, a scientist who had spent her whole life studying signals from deep space, sat in front of a glowing screen with a cup of coffee gone cold hours ago. Her team had been scanning radio waves from different corners of the galaxy for months, but tonight, something strange appeared. A small line of repeating pulses blinked across her monitor. It wasn't random background noise, nor was it from any known satellite or star. It felt deliberate. At first, she thought it was just another error or signal bounce, something caused by interference. But then the pattern repeated again and again at perfect intervals. She leaned closer, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she ran it through filters and decoding programs. Her assistant, Mark, looked up from his station and frowned. "Lena, that's not Earth-based," he said quietly. She didn't respond. Her heart was beating faster. The signal carried a strange rhythm, almost like speech. For hours, they recorded, cleaned, and rechecked the data. The more they looked, the more certain they became that this wasn't something natural. It was a message. Somewhere out there in the endless darkness of space, someone or something was calling for help. When they translated the raw data into sound waves, the room filled with a haunting series of tones and broken mechanical voices. The language was unfamiliar, but the emotion behind it was unmistakable. There was fear in the voices. Lena immediately informed the higher authorities. Within hours, the United Nations Space Communication Center took control of the data. The message was transferred to the world's best linguists, cryptologists, and AI translation systems. The world waited anxiously. News leaked quickly, spreading like wildfire across social media. Some thought it was a hoax. Others believed it was the first proof that humanity wasn't alone. But for those who heard the raw recording, there was no doubt. The voices were real, and they were begging for help. Weeks passed as experts tried to decode the full message. It contained strange symbols, images of burned landscapes and coordinates in a star system far from Earth. Every piece of the transmission spoke of chaos and destruction. One fragment showed a group of alien beings, humanoid but not human, huddled in ruins holding up some kind of device as explosions flashed behind them. Their eyes were filled with terror. In one frame, a symbol resembling a human handprint was visible on a broken wall. That image shook the entire scientific world. Governments around the world called emergency meetings. Space agencies rechecked their instruments. Military analysts wanted to know if the message could be a trap. Some feared it might be from an enemy civilization trying to lure Earth into conflict. But Lena didn't believe that. She had watched the signal again and again. There was desperation in it, not deception. "They're dying out there," she told the committee during a closed session in Geneva. "Whoever they are, they're reaching out because they have no one else to call." The committee listened carefully. The data confirmed that the signal came from nearly 300 light-years away, from a system not yet explored by human probes. The source was small, maybe a colony or a planet with limited technology. But the question that hung in the air was, who attacked them? The fragments of the message hinted at another power, a violent force that had invaded and destroyed their home. Some visuals showed enormous dark ships hovering above burning cities. In others, you could see flashes of blue light cutting through the sky, tearing everything apart. As world leaders debated, scientists grew restless. More parts of the signal began to make sense. It wasn't just a cry for help, it was also a warning. The transmission carried a word that the translation AI marked as devourers or destroyers. Whoever sent the message wanted to warn others about this enemy. They were telling the universe, "Stay away, or you'll face the same fate." In Alaska, Lena sat alone in her office one night, replaying the moment she first received the signal. She had been listening to deep space for 20 years and had never heard anything like it. She couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the terrified faces in that transmission. "Why us?" she whispered to herself. Why did they choose to send it here? But deep down, she knew the answer. Maybe they sent it to Earth because they believed humans would understand. The world's media exploded with theories. Scientists appeared on TV shows, trying to explain the possibilities. Some religious groups called it a divine test, while conspiracy theorists claimed it was a government trick. But amid all the noise, ordinary people around the world felt something new, fear mixed with curiosity. Children looked up at the night sky differently. For the first time, everyone realized how vast and dangerous the universe could be. A week later, a team of astrophysicists confirmed that the coordinates in the message pointed to a planet orbiting a red star. The planet's faint light had been captured before by telescopes, but no one had paid attention. Now it had become the center of the world's focus. They named it Helios 7. The United Nations called it the Helios Distress Event. Secret meetings were held underground in places like Geneva, Washington, Moscow, and Beijing. Every nation sent representatives. The first question was simple: should humanity respond? Some argued that Earth shouldn't interfere, that helping aliens could attract danger. Others said it was humanity's moral duty to answer a call for help, no matter who sent it. But the more they analyzed the images, the clearer the truth became. The attackers were not just violent. They were organized, systematic, and far more advanced. It was during one of these sessions that Lena made a shocking observation. She had been re-examining the data when she found faint energy signatures hidden within the transmission, patterns of communication technology similar to early human satellites. It was impossible, unless the victims had somehow learned from human designs. The idea spread quickly. What if those aliens were not strangers at all, but distant descendants of a lost human expedition, a colony that vanished long ago? This revelation shook the world even more. If it were true, then Earth had a personal connection to those who sent the message. They weren't just calling for help, they were calling home. The story hit every major news channel. Crowds gathered in cities across the globe watching the sky. It no longer felt like a distant alien problem. It felt like family reaching out from the dark. Soon, governments stopped arguing about whether to respond. The question changed to how. The best scientists and military minds were gathered to form a global team under the Earth Defense Accord. But at that early stage, before all the plans and weapons, it was just one simple moment. A faint signal across billions of kilometers of emptiness, heard by a handful of people in a frozen base in Alaska. Lena often thought about that first night. The soft flicker on her screen, the chill running through her spine, the quiet realization that the universe had finally spoken to humanity, not with friendship or curiosity, but with fear and desperation. It wasn't discovery that came to Earth that night. It was responsibility. And somewhere far beyond the stars, a dying civilization waited, hoping that their call had been heard. They didn't know what kind of species lived on the blue planet that caught their signal. They didn't know what humans were capable of when moved by compassion or by anger. The world didn't know it yet, but that single message would change everything. It would unite nations, create the largest space armada in human history, and awaken something powerful inside the human spirit. What started as a whisper of fear from a distant world would soon become the fire that drove Earth into the stars. But on that cold night, no one could imagine any of that. There was only silence, snow, and a lonely scientist staring at a screen, listening to the first distress call ever sent to mankind. The news of the distress signal spread across the world like wildfire. Within days, every television channel, newspaper, and online platform was talking about it. People argued in homes, schools, and offices about what it meant. Some were excited, believing it was proof that humanity was not alone in the universe. Others were afraid, saying that this message could bring danger to Earth. The governments tried to keep calm, but behind closed doors, leaders were panicking. They knew that the message was real. They knew that somewhere a civilization had been destroyed. And now the question wasn't whether aliens existed. It was what humans were going to do about it. At the United Nations headquarters, a special emergency session was called. Delegates from more than 100 countries gathered, sitting around a huge circular table under bright lights. On the screen in front of them, the images from the distress call played once more. The ruined cities, the terrified creatures, and the burning sky. The room was silent except for the sound of the playback. When the video ended, no one spoke for a few seconds. The air was heavy with emotion. Then one of the delegates stood up and said, "If it happened to them, it can happen to us." That sentence changed everything. From that moment, the debate began. Some nations argued that Earth should not get involved in a conflict that was not theirs. "We don't know who these creatures are," said a representative from one country. "For all we know, they could be dangerous themselves." Others disagreed. "If they are victims, if they are calling for help, then we must respond," said another. "If humanity ignores them, what does that make us?" The arguments continued for hours, turning emotional and loud. Scientists sitting in the back rows whispered to each other, trying to find logic in a situation ruled by fear and pride. Dr. Lena Morrow was invited to speak before the council. She stood at the podium, her face tired but calm. "We received a message from intelligent life," she said. "It was not a threat. It was a cry for help. I have analyzed every frequency, every signal fragment. The attackers were organized, advanced, and brutal. The victims had no chance. If we turn away now, we are no better than those who destroyed them." Her words echoed through the hall. Some applauded, while others frowned. But her message planted a seed in everyone's mind. As the world leaders debated, ordinary people reacted too. There were protests in major cities with banners saying things like "Help them" and "Earth is not alone anymore." On the other hand, some groups demanded isolation. They believed the signal was a trap. "We don't know who's out there," said one preacher in a viral video. "If they come to Earth, it might mean our end." The world was divided and fear grew stronger with each passing day. The United Nations formed a secret committee known as the Earth Defense Council. It included the most brilliant scientists, military strategists, and technology experts from every continent. Their mission was clear: study the threat, analyze the signal source, and prepare a possible response. Dr. Lena Morrow was appointed as the chief scientific advisor. She didn't want power or attention. She only wanted to find the truth behind that message. Inside a heavily guarded base in Switzerland, the team worked day and night. Massive holographic displays showed star maps, energy readings, and decoded fragments of alien communication. The more they studied, the clearer the picture became. The attackers, whoever they were, had used weapons far beyond human understanding. The energy readings suggested plasma-based projectiles and gravitational distortion devices. "Whoever these invaders are," said General Takeda, one of the military leaders, "they could crush Earth's defenses in days if they ever came here." That realization changed everything. Suddenly, helping the victims wasn't just an act of compassion, it was an act of survival. If this enemy existed, then one day they might find Earth. The discussion shifted from moral questions to practical ones. Scientists began designing new defense technologies. Governments shared top-secret projects that had been hidden for years. Advanced propulsion systems, prototype plasma cannons, and early models of AI-guided drones. The world had never been so united before. For the first time in history, the rival nations of Earth started working together. Engineers from America worked alongside scientists from China. Russian military strategists shared orbital defense data with European commanders. Even smaller countries contributed resources, offering satellite data and research labs. The fear of the unknown enemy created something unexpected: unity. But unity came with a cost. The world economy shifted toward defense. Resources were redirected from civilian projects to space development. People began to notice shortages of energy and food. News stations started reporting on protests and criticism of the government's decisions. Some said Earth was preparing for a war that might never come. Others believed it was the only way to ensure survival. Meanwhile, in Alaska, the old deep space monitoring station where it all began had become a memorial site. Scientists still worked there, continuing to scan for any more signals. Lena often visited, standing by the same console where she first saw the message. The snow still fell outside and the machine still hummed softly. Sometimes she would close her eyes and imagine the voices of the aliens calling out again. It haunted her, but it also gave her strength. She knew that Earth couldn't ignore them. Months turned into a year and the secret projects grew larger. Massive space yards were built in orbit, where ships unlike anything seen before began to take shape. The world called this program the Armada Initiative. It was not an act of aggression but preparation, a promise that if anyone ever tried to harm Earth, humanity would be ready. The ships were equipped with rail cannons, laser turrets, and hybrid propulsion drives capable of long-distance travel. Each ship carried the name of a city that had once suffered in human wars: Hiroshima, Warsaw, Kabul, and Aleppo, as a reminder that humanity knew the cost of destruction. Even as the Armada was being built, diplomats tried to make contact with whoever was left at the source of the signal. No reply ever came. Every attempt ended in silence. Some scientists believed the senders were already gone, wiped out by the enemy. But others, including Lena, refused to give up hope. If even one survived, she said in a meeting, we have a responsibility to find them. Her determination inspired the council. Inside homes and schools, Children learned about the Helios distress call as part of their history lessons. Humanity was changing, not just technologically but emotionally. For the first time, humans saw themselves as one species, not divided by borders or beliefs. Artists painted murals of stars and unknown worlds. Musicians wrote songs about courage and unity. Even though fear still existed, there was also pride that humans had not turned away. But not everyone supported the movement. Secret groups began spreading rumors that the UN was hiding the real purpose of the Armada. Some believed the governments were planning to conquer other worlds instead of defending their own. These rumors caused unrest, but the Earth Defense Council continued its work silently, ignoring the noise. They knew that time was not on their side. 2 years after the discovery of the signal, a new wave of data arrived from deep space sensors. It wasn't a message, but it was proof that something large had moved through the same star system where the distress call originated. The readings showed signs of huge ships, thousands of kilometers wide, leaving a trail of ionized particles. It was the first evidence that the attackers were real and still active. When this information reached the world leaders, there was no more doubt. Humanity had to act. The Earth Defense Accord was finally signed, a treaty that united every nation under one flag for space defense and exploration. No one wanted to admit it out loud, but everyone knew what this meant. Earth was preparing for war. The fleet still under construction was given a new name, the Vengeful Armada. It was a symbol of humanity's resolve, a warning to whoever had destroyed the helpless civilization in the distress call. In one of the final meetings of the year, Lena looked around the room at the people who had once been rivals but were now allies. "When I first heard that signal," she said quietly, "I thought it was just another discovery. But it wasn't. It was a mirror. It showed us who we are, what we're capable of when we care, and what we can become when we're threatened." As she spoke, images of the half-built fleet hovered on the screen behind her. Giant warships floated above Earth, surrounded by glowing blue construction lights. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. Humanity had turned fear into strength, confusion into purpose. The world that once fought over borders was now building something that would carry its united flag across the stars. No one knew what waited out there. No one could be sure if the attackers would ever come. But one thing was clear: Earth would never again be silent. The distress call had not only awakened fear, it had awakened humanity itself. Months passed since the Earth Defense Accord had been formed, and work on the Great Armada continued in silence. The skies above Earth were filled with the glow of construction stations, satellites, and massive half-built warships. But while the world looked upward with hope and fear, the scientists and commanders of the Earth Defense Council were preparing for something much more important. They were ready to send the first unmanned scout mission to the coordinates that had been hidden in the alien distress signal. Humanity had to know what truly happened out there. The day the probe was launched became a historic moment. The whole world watched as the sleek silver craft named Voyager X9 was fired into space from Earth's orbit. Its engines glowed blue as it accelerated beyond the moon, beyond Mars, and into the cold, dark unknown. On board were hundreds of scanning devices, sensors, and cameras designed to capture every possible detail. It would take months to reach the location of the signal, but people on Earth waited patiently, holding their breath. They wanted answers. During those months, tension grew around the world. Rumors spread that the enemy from the distress signal might already be heading toward Earth. Military satellites were placed around the planet, ready to detect anything unusual. But nothing came. Only silence. It was as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting for humanity to make its next move. Then one morning, months later, the signal arrived. Voyager X9 had reached the destination. In the main control center in Geneva, scientists and military officers gathered as the first images began streaming in. The large monitor flickered with static for a few seconds, and then a gray, lifeless planet appeared. The room fell silent. The surface was dark and scorched. Mountains had collapsed into black dust. Rivers were dried up, and massive craters covered the land like wounds. It was a world that had been destroyed completely. As more data came in, the horror grew. The cameras captured twisted remains of alien buildings, their architecture strange but beautiful even in ruins. There were massive structures, once shining with light, now broken and burned. In one area, the probe detected radiation patterns, evidence of weapons far beyond human technology. The scientists stared in disbelief. Whoever had attacked this planet had done so with precision and cruelty. It wasn't a natural disaster. It was war. Then something unexpected happened. As the probe scanned the northern hemisphere of the planet, it detected strange metallic objects buried beneath the ash. It focused its lens and zoomed in. The screen revealed enormous warships, hundreds of them, lying destroyed in vast battlefields. The hulls were covered with alien symbols and some still glowed faintly, as if the energy inside them hadn't completely died. Around the ships were skeletal remains of creatures, tall, slender beings with elongated arms and gray-blue skin. Some were found clutching small devices, others still lying near their ruined cities. A hush fell over the room as everyone realized they were looking at the victims from the original distress call. Dr. Lena Morrow felt a lump in her throat. She had waited so long for this moment, but seeing it broke her heart. "They fought back," she whispered. "They tried to survive." The camera panned across the horizon, showing a massive crater that stretched for miles. At its center was a black mark burned deep into the planet's surface, a strange symbol resembling a spiked circle. When the linguists analyzed it, they found records of the same shape hidden within the original distress message. It represented the attackers. The data file named them, the Threxian Dominion. The name became a curse in human languages. The Threxians were a warlike empire that traveled across galaxies, conquering weaker civilizations and forcing survivors into slavery. They stripped planets of their resources and left them hollow. There was no mercy in their history, only conquest. Humanity now knew who had destroyed the world that sent the distress call. But what shocked them even more was what the probe found next. In a destroyed settlement near the planet's equator, the probe detected fragments of technology that didn't belong to the Threxians or the victims. When the fragments were analyzed, scientists discovered something impossible. The materials matched human-origin alloys used in early interstellar experiments from centuries ago. The room erupted in confusion. How could human-made metals exist on a planet hundreds of light-years away? The researchers rechecked the data over and over, but the answer remained the same. Finally, Lena stood and voiced the thought that was on everyone's mind. What if they were connected to us? What if these people were descendants of an ancient human expedition that was lost long ago? It sounded crazy, but history had recorded several space missions that vanished without a trace. Some of them had been launched secretly during Earth's early space colonization period. If one of those missions had survived, evolved, and built a civilization on another planet, then the victims of the Threxians were, in a way, humanity's distant relatives. The revelation spread across the world like fire. News agencies broadcast it instantly, calling it the Lost Bloodline discovery. For the first time, people saw the tragedy not just as an alien war, but as a personal loss. It wasn't just strangers who had been destroyed. It was family. The reaction was powerful. Cities around the world held candlelight vigils. People prayed for the lost colony. Children in schools wrote letters addressed to our cousins in the stars. The whole planet seemed to share the same heartbeat. Governments, however, were thinking differently. The discovery meant something darker too. If the Threxians had destroyed human descendants, then Earth itself was in danger. The message had been a warning, but now it was also a declaration of war. The Earth Defense Accord immediately accelerated the building of the Armada. Factories that once made cars or aircraft were turned into shipyards. Scientists worked sleepless nights creating new kinds of propulsion engines and quantum shields. Every nation poured its resources into preparing for what felt inevitable, a confrontation. In secret meetings, the Council reviewed all data sent by Voyager X9. The probe had captured one last thing before shutting down. In its final transmission, it recorded a faint energy signal coming from beneath the planet's crust. It wasn't from Threxian technology, it was something else, something old. The probe tried to dig deeper, but the system overloaded and contact was lost. Before it went offline, it sent a blurry image of a glowing structure underground, like a beacon still trying to send a message. Some believed it was the last surviving device from the lost colony, trying to call Earth one final time. Lena couldn't sleep that night. She sat by the window of her apartment staring at the stars. The thought that humanity had ancient relatives out there, wiped out by monsters, filled her with anger and sadness. "They reached out to us," she whispered, "and we couldn't save them. But then she realized maybe it wasn't too late to make things right. The Threxians might have destroyed that world, but Earth was still standing. Humanity still had a chance to answer. Around the world, people began to feel the same emotion, fury. They had mourned long enough. Now they wanted justice. When the United Nations released official images from Voyager X9, showing the burning cities and the fallen victims, the world changed overnight. Social media exploded with a single phrase that spread like wildfire: never again. Posters appeared in cities with those words written under the image of a starship rising from Earth. Soldiers volunteered in record numbers. Engineers signed up to work on the fleet. Humanity's sorrow had turned into determination. In the following months, as the Armada's first ships were completed, they were given names that honored both Earth and the fallen colony. Names like Helios Guardian, Freedom's Echo, and the Dawn of Sol. The sight of these ships rising from Earth's orbit brought tears to many eyes. It was no longer just about defense. It was about vengeance and protection, about making sure that no cry for help would ever go unanswered again. Dr. Lena Morrow was appointed as Chief Scientific Coordinator for the fleet's exploratory division. Her mission was to prepare the long-range scanners and communication arrays that would guide the Armada across light years. Though she remained calm in meetings, deep inside she carried a fire. She had seen what the Threxians did. She had seen the ruins of a civilization that might have been part of humanity's lost story. She would not let it happen again. One night, as she stood on the observation deck of the main command base, she looked at the enormous ships being assembled in orbit. Their lights shimmered like stars. She knew the risks, they might never return. But she also knew this was what humanity was meant to do: to stand up when others fell, to fight when others couldn't, to bring justice where there had been none. The distress call that had once frightened Earth had now united it. The images from Voyager X9 had turned fear into resolve. Every person, from the smallest child to the highest general, understood that Earth was no longer just a planet. It was a promise. A promise that if anyone in the galaxy cried for help again, humanity would answer. And this time they would not just listen, they would fight. The day finally came when Earth's fleet was ready. After years of hard work, sacrifice, and endless sleepless nights, humanity had built the most powerful force it had ever imagined. The space above Earth was no longer empty and silent. Thousands of shining ships floated there, glowing softly under the sunlight. From the ground, people could look up and see them like moving stars, proof that their planet was no longer weak or alone. The Great Armada had been completed, and its mission was clear: to travel across the stars to the world that had called for help and face the ones who destroyed it, the Threxian Dominion. Each ship was a masterpiece of technology and determination. They were designed with both beauty and strength. Some were massive, carrying thousands of soldiers, while others were fast and agile, built for reconnaissance and combat. Every ship carried a name that symbolized courage. Names like New Hope, Liberty Star, Spirit of Terra, and the Resolute Dawn, the flagship that would lead the entire fleet. Inside that flagship, Dr. Lena Morrow stood at the observation window, watching Earth grow smaller behind her. She felt proud, but her heart was heavy. She knew this mission might change everything. Humanity was stepping into the unknown, and once they crossed the line between their solar system and the vast interstellar dark, there would be no turning back. Before departure, the world watched live broadcasts as leaders spoke. The Secretary General of the United Nations addressed the planet from the global space terminal. His words echoed everywhere, from the crowded cities to the quiet villages. "We do not go to conquer," he said. "We go to answer a cry for help. We go to protect those who cannot protect themselves. But to those who would destroy and enslave, know this: humanity does not forgive easily. We do not forget." The crowd below roared with pride, and the speech became a symbol of unity. Even those who had once doubted the mission now felt the same fire. Humanity was not sending monsters into space, it was sending justice. When the engines of the Armada ignited, the sky lit up in silver and blue. The ships rose one after another, breaking through the clouds, disappearing into the stars. Children waved flags, families cried, and soldiers inside the ships looked out through the viewports, seeing their home fade into a small blue dot. Some whispered quiet prayers. Others simply closed their eyes, remembering why they were going, to make sure no other world suffered as the one in the distress call had. The journey was long. Even with the new quantum drives, it took months to cross the vast distances of space. The Armada traveled in formation, their engines pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Inside the ships, life was busy and tense. Engineers maintained the systems day and night. Soldiers trained in zero gravity, scientists, including Lena, studied the maps sent by the first probe, marking the areas of interest and possible Threxian strongholds. There was silence outside, but inside, the hum of activity never stopped. During one night cycle, Lena stood in the control center, studying a star chart projected in front of her. General Takeda, commander of the fleet, walked in. "We're getting close," he said quietly. Lena nodded. Her eyes were focused on the glowing red dot on the map, the coordinates of the destroyed world. "Do you think they'll be waiting for us?" she asked. Takeda's voice was firm. "They'll underestimate us. That will be their mistake." A few days later, the Armada reached the edge of Threxian space. The stars looked different here, darker, colder. The first scouts were sent forward to gather data. What they found confirmed their worst fears. A massive Threxian fleet was stationed near the same system that had sent the original distress call. The alien ships were monstrous in size, shaped like blades and shadows, black and crimson with energy veins glowing across their hulls. They moved slowly but with terrifying precision. The first encounter happened near a ruined moon orbiting the dead planet. A small human reconnaissance vessel, Eagle 1, was detected by a Threxian patrol. The aliens opened fire instantly, their plasma beams cutting through the darkness like lightning. But the humans were ready. The ship's AI calculated return fire patterns within seconds, and energy cannons lit up the black space. The first Threxian patrol was destroyed. It was humanity's first victory in a war that would soon burn across the stars. The Threxians underestimated humans. They thought of Earth as a primitive planet, unaware of true war. But when the main fleet arrived, they saw something they had never imagined. Hundreds of human ships appeared out of hyperspace, surrounding the Threxian battle line in perfect formation. The stars themselves seemed to tremble as the two forces faced each other. For a few moments there was silence. Then the first shot was fired. The battle that followed was beyond imagination. Human ships moved with fierce precision, their engines glowing bright blue as they danced between enemy fire. Swarms of AI-controlled drones launched from the carriers, attacking the Threxian vessels in coordinated waves. Explosions flashed across the void like storms of fire. The flagship Resolute Dawn led the charge, unleashing kinetic rail slugs that tore through enemy armor like paper. Inside the command deck, Lena watched the chaos unfold on the holographic display. "Direct all power to forward shields," shouted General Takeda. "Target their reactors." The crew worked with focus and discipline. For every human ship that was lost, 2 Threxian warships fell. The aliens tried to retreat, but the humans were relentless. They were not fighting for conquest. They were fighting for justice. The Threxians soon realized that the humans were unlike any enemy they had faced. They were emotional, unpredictable, and united by something far stronger than fear: revenge. A captured Threxian transmission revealed their confusion. These creatures fight as if every strike is personal, and in a way, it was. As the battle raged on, the sky around the destroyed world became a graveyard of ships. Flames and debris floated silently through space. Human medevac ships rescued survivors from both sides. Even some Threxian soldiers who surrendered. It was the first time the galaxy saw humans not just as warriors, but as beings capable of mercy amid destruction. The final phase of the war came when the Resolute Dawn and its escort ships reached the Threxian command carrier, AE. Massive fortress ship 3 times larger than any vessel humanity had built. Its dark armor shimmered like liquid metal, and it carried the symbol of the spiked circle that had been burned into the dead planet. "That's the one," Lena said, her voice trembling. "That's the monster that destroyed them." General Takeda gave the order without hesitation. "All ships focus fire on the command carrier. Let them know what Earth's vengeance looks like." The battle lasted for hours. The Threxian ship fought back with unimaginable force, its weapons slicing through entire squadrons. But humanity refused to retreat. The crew of Resolute Dawn pushed their engines to the limit, closing the distance. Lena worked frantically to calculate the perfect strike point in the enemy's reactor core. When the moment came, she looked at Takeda and nodded. "Now," she said, "the main cannon fired. The beam tore through space, striking the Threxian flagship right in the center. For a second, nothing happened. Then the ship exploded in a brilliant wave of light that spread across the battlefield. The blast illuminated the dark space, shining like a second sun. The Threxian fleet broke apart in panic, retreating in every direction. Humanity had won. When the smoke cleared, the human ships gathered silently. They looked at the ruins of the enemy fleet and the shattered remains of the planet below. It was over. The Threxian dominion had been broken. Humanity had answered the distress call, and they had done it with strength, fury, and unity. On the bridge of Resolute Dawn, Lena stood quietly, watching the debris drift past. Around her, the crew cheered and hugged each other, but she didn't smile. "We did it," Takeda said softly. Lena nodded. "Yes," she replied, "but at what cost?" She knew that thousands of human lives had been lost in the battle. Victory always came with a price. Back on Earth, when the news of the victory reached home, people filled the streets in celebration. The skies were filled with fireworks and children waved flags. The phrase, "We answered the call," became a symbol of human pride. The world had changed forever. Humanity was no longer just a small planet in a corner of the galaxy. It had become a force to be respected, even feared. But far away in the quiet of space, the remaining Threxian ships fled into the darkness, carrying with them stories of the humans, the fierce warriors from the blue world who fought like fire. The galaxy would remember that day forever. The distress call that had once brought fear to Earth had now triggered something far greater. The rise of Earth's Vengeful Armada, and the birth of a legend that would echo through the stars for generations to come. The war was over, but peace did not come easily. The human fleet drifted in silence among the wreckage of the battle. The stars around them were quiet again, but that silence felt strange, almost heavy. The soldiers who had fought so fiercely now looked out at the remains of what had once been the Threxian Dominion's pride. There was no cheering this time, no loud celebration, only the slow realization that the fight had truly ended, and that so many lives, human and alien, had been lost in the fire of vengeance. On the flagship Resolute Dawn, the crew worked slowly to repair the damaged systems. Sparks flickered from broken panels, and medics moved through the corridors tending to the wounded. The smell of burnt metal and ozone filled the air. General Takeda stood near the observation window, his uniform torn and covered in dust. He had seen many battles in his lifetime, but none like this. For the first time, he felt both pride and sorrow mixing inside him. Humanity had won, but victory felt heavier than he had ever imagined. Dr. Lena Morrow walked into the command deck, holding a small data drive in her hand. She looked tired, her face pale, her eyes distant. She had spent hours scanning the wreckage of the Threxian flagship. "It's over," she said softly, handing the drive to Takeda. "Their central command is gone. The distress call," we answered. "We finally avenged it." Takeda nodded but didn't speak. He looked out into space where pieces of metal floated silently. The once terrifying Threxian fleet was nothing more than dust and shadows now. He turned to Lena and said, "Do you think they'll remember us?" She gave a sad smile. "Oh, they'll remember us. The whole galaxy will." The next few weeks were spent rebuilding and rescuing survivors. Human engineers worked with alien prisoners who had surrendered. To everyone's surprise, some of the Threxians were not as monstrous as they had seemed during battle. They were soldiers too, following orders, fighting for their own kind. One of them, a young Threxian officer with pale gray skin, told Lena, "We were told humans were savages, but you showed mercy." Those words stayed in her mind. The fleet collected the remaining survivors from the destroyed colonies. They found traces of life on one of the moons, a small group of refugees who had escaped before the Threxians wiped out their world. When they saw the human ships, they fell to their knees and wept. "You came," one of them cried. "We thought no one heard us." Lena stood among them, feeling her throat tighten. "We heard you," she said, "and we came as fast as we could." The moment was powerful. For the first time, the humans understood what their mission truly meant. They hadn't just avenged a dead world. They had saved lives. The refugees were taken aboard the Resolute Dawn. They were weak and frightened, but grateful beyond words. One small child held Lena's hand tightly and whispered, "Thank you for bringing the light." It was a sentence that would stay with her forever. When the fleet finally turned back toward Earth, there was a strange mix of relief and unease. The soldiers wanted to go home. to see their families again, but they also knew they were no longer the same people who had left. They had seen what war looked like beyond their world, cold, merciless, and endless. Humanity had proven its strength, but at a great cost. During the journey home, the crew members shared stories. Some laughed quietly, others sat in silence, lost in thought. There were rows of empty chairs in the mess halls, reminders of those who didn't return. Lena often walked through the corridors at night, looking out into the blackness of space. Sometimes she imagined she could still hear the faint echo of that first distress signal, the one that had started everything. When the Armada finally reached Earth's orbit, the sight was breathtaking. Billions of people had gathered across the planet to watch the fleet return. The skies were filled with light, signals, fireworks, and cheers that echoed from every continent. The ships descended slowly, their metallic hulls shining in the sunlight. On every screen and broadcast, people watched and cried. Humanity had gone to the stars and come back victorious. The crew of Resolute Dawn stood together as they landed at the global space terminal. General Takeda stepped down first, saluting the crowd that had gathered to welcome them. Behind him came Lena, holding the flag of Earth in her hands. Reporters and officials surrounded them, asking questions, praising them, celebrating the victory. But Lena felt quiet inside. When one reporter asked her how it felt to destroy the enemy that had killed so many, she replied, "We didn't just destroy. We also learned. We learned how dangerous power can be and how thin the line is between justice and revenge." Her words spread quickly. They reminded people that this victory was not only about strength, it was also about responsibility. The governments of Earth soon formed the Galactic Council for Peace, an alliance meant to ensure that what happened to the destroyed planet would never happen again. They invited other alien species, those who had been oppressed by the Threxians, to join them. For the first time in history, humans were not just part of Earth. They were part of the galaxy. Lena continued her work as a scientist, now focusing on peaceful communication technologies. She helped develop a network that could reach across light years in seconds, allowing civilizations to send distress signals or messages of friendship instantly. She believed that if communication had existed earlier, maybe the destroyed world could have been saved before it was too late. General Takeda, on the other hand, was offered a high position in the new Galactic Defense Alliance, but he refused. "I've seen enough war," he said. "It's time for new voices to lead." He retired to a quiet home near the ocean, spending his days watching the waves. Sometimes, when the night was clear, he would look up at the stars and remember the faces of those he had lost and those they had saved. Years passed. The story of Earth's Armada became legend. Children learned about it in schools, calling it the Great Response. Statues were built not of soldiers but of a simple radio tower, the symbol of that first distress call. People would gather there every year to remember the cost of that victory and to honor those who had given everything for it. One day, many years later, Lena stood at that same monument. She was older now, her hair streaked with silver. She looked up at the tower and thought of how it all began, with a simple, desperate message from the stars. She remembered the fear, the courage, and the unity that had followed. As she looked up at the sky, a soft wind brushed against her face. The stars twinkled like they were whispering something. Then her communicator beeped softly. A young officer's voice came through. "Dr. Morrow, we've received another signal. Unknown origin. It's faint, but it's there." Lena's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the communicator, then at the stars. A new distress call? After all these years? She didn't hesitate. "Patch it through," she said. The message was broken, filled with static, but a voice could be heard, a voice that was afraid, just like before. For a moment, she stood completely still. The memories of the past came flooding back, the dead planet, the fleet, the fire. But she also remembered the refugees they had saved, the peace they had built, and the promise they had made. She smiled softly. "We'll answer it," she whispered. "We always do." The young officer's voice trembled. "Should I inform the council?" "Yes," Lena replied, her eyes still fixed on the stars. "Tell them Earth is listening." That night, the world once again turned its eyes toward the heavens. Humanity had changed since the first time. They had learned compassion, control, and the weight of their power. The fleets that once carried vengeance now stood ready to protect. No longer just an armada of war, they had become an armada of hope. And somewhere in the dark corners of the galaxy where fear still lived, beings whispered the same words over and over. Do not wake the humans. For if they hear your cry, they will come. But this time it would not be vengeance they carried. It would be the light of mercy and the strength of unity. The distress call that once triggered Earth's Vengeful Armada had changed humanity forever. It had taught them that sometimes the greatest power in the universe is not destruction, but the courage to listen and to answer when someone calls for help.